One.
Good evening and welcome to the Lower Makefield Township Historical Commission meeting for April 13th. We have a pretty packed agenda today. We're going to start out actually with two guests that are coming. One is C.T. Trolio, who's going to discuss his proposal for the project in Edgewood Village, and the other is Donna Doan from the Patterson Farm Preservation. And she's going to discuss a proposed dendrochronology project for Satterfield. So CT's already there, so we're going to bring him in first. I know I have on the agenda the approval of the minutes, but since CT is waiting, let's take care of the guests first, and then we can approve them in the minutes. So John, if you can go ahead and bring CT on.
Six. I can hit.
Is he there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, welcome to the Historical Commission meeting. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me. Hello, all.
So, we saw the information that you had sent out, and I had also distributed or sent out around a link for last night's Harb meeting. So I don't know if everybody had a chance to watch that. So, but I at least had a chance to look at that. So, how would you like to proceed with the project? I don't know if Jim Majewski's joining us, but if you like, I can pull up the proposal, the elevations, or do you have them to display?
If you could pull them up, that would be great.
And Joe, before we start, this is Dan. For those of you that don't know, last night CT gave a presentation to the Harb, and the Harb group gave several recommendations and a lot of feedback for CT's consideration. So I think there may be some additional iterations beyond what you see tonight. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that there was a meeting last night that covered a lot of items, including consideration of porches and sidewalks and density and buffers and whatnot. That CT can elaborate a little more on that. But it was a good meeting and had a lot of good feedback, very interactive. So I wanted to preface it with that Harb is. I think this is still a bit of an organic process, right? It's still changing a little bit based on responses. Very productive, but I don't want anyone to think this is the last. This is it right here. But also, please feel free to give your feedback, because I know you will. I just want to give that a little bit of intro, Joe.
Okay, great, Dan. Thank you.
Before we go, hey Tom, can you mute? We're just getting some feedback from your microphone. Thank you. Sorry, Joe.
Okay, good. I'm just getting these files opened up here. What I could do is
Great.
Can you see this now? Let me see. There should be a way that I can get it to display the full thing. Or maybe we could just work off of this.
That's fine.
Okay.
So, sorry. Go ahead.
I'll let you walk through the proposal. So we have the sketch here, and then we have the elevations behind this.
So, as Dan said, this is the proposal we brought in front of the Harb last night and did receive a lot of feedback. So I thought what I'd do is I'll kind of go through what we were proposing last night, and then kind of expand on what Harb brought up, and then we can go from there. Because as Dan said, this is obviously not the final proposal now. Sound good?
Okay, yep.
All right, so this is the new site plan. And if some of the bigger differences on it are we've cut the number of building pods or building units from there was 3 distinct buildings in the last go around that totaled 17 units. We cut a 4-unit building out, and now we've reduced it to just the 2 pods of buildings with an addition onto the quill house. So we went from 17 to 13, to 14. What that accomplished, besides reducing the density and reducing the visual density, it allowed us to meet the parking requirements on the site with enough parking spaces that we didn't have to do the off-street parking, and because there was some objection to that over at the Veterans Park, so there's some issues there. We added some I call them porch roofs to the buildings fronting along Yardley Langhorne Road, and we staggered the building fronts to break up the monotony of the buildings. We had looked at moving the parking lot. There was a suggestion about moving it over and paralleling it with Langhorne Yardley Road. It didn't really work that well, and visually it wasn't that appealing, as you're looking out over the parking lot at any of these structures, where this way you still see the parking lot, but you're seeing it long ways. So from the street, it appears not as wide. We were still asking about not having sidewalks along Yardley Langhorne Road. And then we asked about removing the quill house and replacing it with a reconstruction of it along with the addition. So that basically sums up the site plan and the changes from the previous site plan. So we prepared some drawings showing the relations of the buildings between each other and to the existing buildings on the site. We're still proposing redoing the stone house on the side. So I don't know if you want to run through those pictures and I can explain the various vantage points. So this first picture is you're looking over Yardley Langhorne Road. The stone house on the point is on the right. And then you see the 6-unit one is in the middle. The 4-unit one is on the left. And the parking is further down on the left. This is again looking over Yardley Langhorne Road, but you're closer down towards the CVS, looking back up towards the point. On the far right, you can see the stone house on the point, the 6-unit, and then the 4-unit. And in the corner, you can see someone who's gotten out of their car and is walking towards the buildings. This is from the neighbor's property looking over the parking lot. So on the left-hand side is the addition to the quill house. To the right is the 4-unit, and then straight ahead, you're looking right in the middle, filling the gap is you're looking at the end of the 6-unit. This is over by Edgewood, close to the entrance of where the Di Lorenzo's Pizza is. So on the right-hand side, you're looking at the reconstructed quill house. You're looking at the end of the 6-unit, and then you're looking at the the renovated stone house on the point. This is closer towards the intersection. Right on the left, you can just see the edge of the stone house on the point. You can see the 6-unit, and then you can see the reconstructed quill house with the addition on the left side sticking out. That is, I think that's back to the beginning. That's
right.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yardley Langhorne Road, across the street with the end of the stone house on the right, 6 unit in the middle, and 4 on the left.
So from the historical commission, comments, feedback?
Yes. So first off, they were talking about porches themselves.
This is the Harb. We're going to review what the Harb said last night, right?
Yes, this is, yeah, I'll review what the Harb, some of the comments from the Harb. And so the porches aren't adequate. They're not really porches. And even if they had stoops matching the overhangs, they're not big enough. So it was suggested that if we staggered the houses more, let's say looking at this picture, move the stone one, or let's say move the white side back, and that would allow us to put a full porch across the front of it with a lower porch. And then on the back side, do the same thing to the stone part, so that we actually, they want us to actually create porches. And we talked to the engineer today, and we are looking at repositioning the houses and the pods and doing that. Another big issue was the sidewalk along Yardley Langhorne Road. Besides economics, the reason we don't want to do that is dealing with PennDOT, which could be problematic. Now, I talked to Mr. Majewski this afternoon, and he suggested we take a look at it, and that we might be able to shift the houses so we can actually do the sidewalk, but not have it in the PennDOT right of way. So we're taking a look at that so we can comply with that element. One thing that Mr. Hines had said, it just mentioned that on the other side of the Stone Point house, we'd showed some double windows, and he indicated that we'd have to leave the original, they would want the original windows sizing kept. They also suggested that, so there on the left-hand side, you see where we have the double windows existing there now are just single windows.
Okay.
So he indicated that the Harb would want them to remain singles. And they also suggested that we look at breaking up this 6 unit and maybe going to a 4 and then a 2, and repositioning that the 6 unit might be a little too big for the setting. They mentioned maybe having a steeper pitch on the roof and a little more differentiation between the buildings, maybe some dormers on one and no dormers on another. And they are not disposed to us removing the quill house and replacing it. They would like us to renovate it, or at least save parts of it. Mr. Hines was mentioning the Scammell's Corners house, where they kept the one wall and built a new structure around it. That maybe he thought maybe it's balloon framed, and that we could keep some of the exterior walls and build new around it. So we're going to examine that possibility as well. I'm sure there are other items mentioned, but those were the items that I wrote down as action items.
CT, I can say that you did a pretty good job summarizing. The only other item that's stuck out a little bit, and I think you're covering it, is the excuse me, landscape buffer between the two properties,
Yes.
Dr. Semino's property and yours.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, we haven't devised a landscape plan, but it's required. Obviously, we would do whatever is required.
Yeah. I know I took copious notes last night, and I think you actually covered it pretty well. Good job.
Thank you.
Comments from the commission? Questions?
Helen, I'm seeing 6/6 windows. I thought 6/9 was more appropriate. Is that not the case?
Unmute here. Let me unmute here. The architecture is something that is only slightly addressed in the TND, and that's sort of reserved for the hard board to rule on that. I think they're too wide. They need to resemble more the older buildings. But our interest really is in the TND and how this conforms to the TND and to our goal of even creating this TND, which was to salvage the historic houses. So starting with, we're going to take down the Quill House is kind of a non-starter in terms of we really need to preserve every one of the remaining houses that are listed as part of our historic registry in LMT. And there, I would strongly advise that you do that in every possible way, save what you can of the structure of the Quill House, and conform, or just at least make the attempt to conform with that. And certainly with the Ishmael House, it's totally against National Register standards to change the openings. It needs to be kept the way that it is, and if that means that the glass is, as I think Steve was recommending, that it could be a casement that looks like an overhung window, that's fine. But the openings, you shouldn't go adjusting the stone. That's going to be so problematic for the homeowner. The porch is actually larger than it was ever pictured. I have 3 pictures from about 1980, 2000, and 2018 for that house, and that porch has never been as wide as that. That said, I think that there was originally a porch on the Quill House, and kind of extending that around would be interesting. However, I also checked out the TND on the number, because the number bothers me. That big 6-unit massing is just awful. The TND specifically says if this is a townhouse development, which I presume it is, it looks like the houses that are Floral. Is that correct?
No, these are apartments.
Okay, so these are apartments. It's still, so you're intending to actually rent these as apartment units, so that's why you're asking for relief from the commercial below?
Correct.
Okay, because that's the difference between the way the TND was set up, was that we wanted the apartments to be above a commercial use below in order to kind of keep the village vibrant. And even turning that center unit so that it's along the street edge would make more sense to me, if that's what it's meant to be. At some point, perhaps somebody would want to have a commercial use below and live above. But this is advertised as dwelling units in your application, and I could not find anything in the TND which approves 6 dwelling units. And checking out your development at Floral Vale, there is no unit, even in townhouses, that are longer than 4. So I would really suggest you look at how it's configured, kind of lining up along the street edge. I like the parking lot. I would have preferred to see, we really wanted to do traffic calming on anything that goes into the major collector roads. And I would really have liked to see a cutout parking along the street, which would give you more spaces along the street and more on the Langhorne Road than on the Edgewood Road, and actually help calm traffic, which was the sole purpose of having this become a commercial district, to calm the traffic, take it down to 25 miles an hour, whatever it has to be. But that's my input.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Comments, questions? CT, I guess my comments go along the same lines of Helen with regards to this 2 historic properties because they're both contributing elements to the historic district. And therefore, the Secretary of Interior defines, 4 treatment approaches for historic places: preservation, rehabilitation, restoration, and reconstruction. And, it looks like, either the proposal for the Ishmael House or the Quill House is, I can't even put it in one of those buckets, right? Because, you're not staying true to the historic fabric at Ishmael. And then even with Quill, when you're reconstructing it, it looks almost identical to the other units. So, you want some homogeneity in there, as Helen's talking about. You want that feel, but you also want the historic properties to be seen as historic properties, right? You don't want everyone, they're all looking the same, and then you'll never know. You can't tell that they're historic properties. So in your thoughts on the Quill House, were you trying to do a reconstruction of the house to a certain time period, or were you more or less thinking about rehabilitating the existing? You're not going to rehabilitate it because you said you're going to tear it down. So you're looking at reconstructing it, correct?
Correct. We were looking at reconstructing it at its point in time, maybe 20 years ago. So basically, what the modern version of it.
Right.
But I mean, if there's pictures of a different time period, we certainly would be open to look at it, something like that as well.
Right.
And even if we do end up doing a renovation on it, again, if there's a bigger porch and it looks nicer or makes more sense, we'd certainly look at that.
Yeah, 'cause
Thanks,
I think,
CT.
go ahead.
The other thing about the Quill House, you have an addition on the back of it, and according to the TND, it shouldn't be more than 10% of the original structure. And that looks a lot more than 10%. I don't know, but I think we have already conceded, CT, on this development that even though legally it should be 12 dwelling units going in, because you're making the attempt to save the Quill House and save the Dougherty House, we will live with the 14. But more than that is really pushing it. And as I said, if you take down another unit, you're going to need less parking. There's going to be less impact on the site. You're going to have more amenities for the people living there. The sidewalk needs to be on the Langhorne Road as well. If we're having a walking village and a calm traffic calming, I would really urge you, I know you don't want to deal with PennDOT, but I would really urge you to push them as far as you possibly can to get that, the cut, have more parking on street parking, and especially on the Langhorne Road. That sounds ridiculous, but actually we really want that to be calmed down. And I'm sure the skate shop across the street would like it to be calmed down, and anybody else, the veterinarian, all the people who have businesses along that street would prefer that kind of a segment. And your drawing here actually seems to indicate it's a lot wider than it is. I think it's only like 12 feet, 16 feet, something like that. So it's kind of deceptive, but I think just look at that. If you possibly can do it, I think it would make it more user friendly to the people buying into this development, and that if they could walk and have a parking that's, especially for that Point House. I mean, to walk from that parking lot all the way carrying stuff is just going to be crazy. Whereas if there's on-street parking that they can kind of glom into, I think that would make more sense. Either that or have a driveway pulling off for that house in particular, because otherwise it's just not going to be terribly useful. I know the rest of you guys aren't really terribly familiar with the TND and what it's about, but basically this township made a decision back in the early 2000s that we would see this as sort of a peddler's village application in Edgewood in order to create a viable commercial space with housing, and especially lower end apartments and housing for younger people that would come into our township and choose to live here. Now, right across this, Dan mentioned last night, this is going to be connected to Prickett's. And I would prefer that this be the expensive housing because it's got this ambiance of the historic village. You're living in a National Registered district. I think that makes it a great sales point for using this as a real moneymaker for your organization, CTA, and that's what I'm hoping to do here. So I wanted to see the best possible outcome that we can get.
Thank you.
So CT, to recap then, I guess additions to what the Harb said last night, based on Dr. Hines' comments with the on-the-street parking, right, in order to, give it more of a village impact as well as slow the traffic down. Looking at the reduction of the density, especially on the 6-unit one building, and then the 2 historic properties, trying to stay closer to the Secretary of Interior standards on, for rehabilitation on the house at the point, and then I guess for reconstruction on this house, but just so that they do appear historic and they don't just completely blend in with the houses around them, because people would lose that historic feel if we do that.
Understand.
Yeah. And Joe, the only thing I'll reiterate from what Dr. Hines was saying, and I said this last night, but I'll say it another way tonight, on the one sidewalk that isn't there right now, but I think CT, I think I said this a little bit last night, in terms of this district, I think, you're the one that knows more about the market, obviously, but in terms of connecting it to Flowers Fields is connected to Prickett, it creates a full village feel where you can walk if you're so inclined, or ride your bike more likely, depending on those paths throughout, which also has the knock-on effect of slowing things down from a traffic perspective, because the visual of people actually on sidewalks is quite a big deal, I think, in practice. I'll say this half jokingly, but we also have a wonderful traffic engineer in town, Joe Fiacco, who worked for PennDOT for many, many years, who, as you go through this process, I'm sure, I know I've done work for PennDOT over the years. They're a wonderful organization. As you go through it, you use him as an ear and maybe to help you out in terms of that particular issue, because I think it benefits everybody. Otherwise, for the buildings, I think the Harb is consistent with what Historic Commission's saying tonight too. So I don't have anything else to say there.
Right.
My last comment will be about that. PennDOT, I think, committed an egregious mistake putting that monstrous light signal at the corner of Stony Hill and Langhorne Road. And a historic district like this should have specialized lighting. And there's money now available from the state. And I think we should avail ourselves of that great engineer and get that intersection redesigned so that there is I would suggest sort of like a Keswick Theater sort of old-fashioned signaling, and it would look better, and that would give you more space on the corner to make that restaurant a more centralized plaza effect around the edges of the restaurant. That would be great.
Any other comments or questions?
I've got one really quickly. Hi, CT. Thank you for all this. You talked a little bit about your plans for the Quill House, and potentially keeping some of the outer walls. Can you talk a little bit? And if you did already, and I missed it, I'm sorry. Can you talk a little bit about your plans for the Ishmael House?
That would be renovated into a residential unit.
Would the intention be to keep the existing structure as
Yes.
is?
Yes. Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
Hey, CT, thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity. Appreciate you coming out tonight and explaining this to us and hearing our feedback. And we look forward to some further revisions.
I appreciate your guys' time and all the work you do with the commission.
Okay. And if there's any information you need from us, you mentioned some older pictures or something like that, or information, please just send me an email. We'll look it up for you, okay?
Super. Thank you very much.
All right, very good. Thank you. So next on our agenda is moving over to Patterson Farm. There is a recommendation from Patterson Farm Preservation for doing a dendrochronology project to begin to age parts of Satterthwaite. So Donna Doan and John, is Donna there? Is Donna join it?
Yep, bring her in now.
Okay, so Donna's going to join us, and hopefully you had a chance to review that. She'll give a brief overview of the project, and then we can ask her some questions.
Hello.
Hi, Donna.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Good, thank you for joining us tonight. So I just gave an introduction about the, well, just mentioned that it's a dendrochronology project for the purpose of aging Satterthwaite, but I figured I'd let you give an overview as to what you'd like to accomplish for the project, and then maybe we can ask some questions.
Okay, sure. I reached out to Michael Cuba, who did the dendrochronology testing out the William Tennant House, where I'm also a member there. And just to give a little background, dendrochronology is the science or technology of dating events, environmental change, and archaeological artifacts by using the characteristic patterns of annual growth rings in timber and tree trunks. So that's the basis of that science. But we really wanted to take a look at the cottage on the farm and the Satterthwaite house too, to see if we can confirm that the cottage goes back to the 1600s. And so we pitched the idea also to Matt over at the Bucks County Community College, and we thought maybe we could collaborate with his students. He is the head of the historic preservation program over there, Matt Metcalf, and he loved the idea. So he wrote a letter to the township, which I've provided to you, and I assume that the members of the committee also have that as well, to teach, have Michael come in, do the testing, have the students of the historic preservation program observe, and then Michael can teach that science as a hands-on project for the students. And then the samples would be taken. They would go to the Oxford Dendrochronology Laboratory in England, and they take about 2 or 3 months to come back with the results. So I think it's a nice opportunity for not only the students, but also the public to get involved. We may need samples from other homes in the area. So those samples that are taken from Patterson Farm would actually become part of the database in Oxford, England. So it's an interesting project to not only build the history of Bucks County, but to explore a little bit more about Patterson Farm specifically.
Donna, the proposal that we have called for four phases or 4 samples, if you would, sections to be collected. Could you review for us what would be the 4?
It would depend on what we need, what areas of interest. The cottage would be one. I think Michael said he would like more than 1 sample, of course, from each building. So what he would do is come in, he'll take a look through the buildings before he does the actual sampling. And if I had known that you all were going through the houses the other day, I would have asked if he could be included in that tour, because he just wants to take a look and make sure that the quality of the wood is there and the rings that he's looking for are there as well. So he would send those samples away. Like I said, 2 for the cottage, maybe 2 for Satterthwaite. Specifically the back section, Helen could probably address that a little bit more, because I know that she did a little bit of research in the back of that house too. Perhaps the barns, depending on whatever the budget is.
Yeah, Donna, the back section, Tom and I were examining the interior of that fireplace, and there should be an interior fire break that's wood, that's well charred, often they would catch on fire and be replaced. So we're going to have to scout around and see if we can find something in the ceiling and sidewall that is also old, and that will require probably some permission from our township. I don't know who I'd even ask. Probably Majewski, or maybe building and public works seems to take a lot of the heavy lifting for the farm. So maybe ask Greg Hucklebridge to approve our sort of tentative looking for timbers either on that side of the wall or on the other side. Tom discovered that there's a covered staircase that actually comes into the other room at the base, right, Tom? That went up to the second floor of the what I call the Bailey section of the house. And if there's a timber in that wall at some point against the probably against the base, against the plate, that would probably be one of the oldest timbers that we could find from that structure. That said, the 1730s designation would be interesting as well. So that would be the second section of the house, and there's plenty of timbers for that.
So do you think that sampling two sections of Satterthwaite would be enough, Helen, or would you want to sample three?
I hope we can even find two sections. Honestly, I'm very concerned that it's going to be difficult. I know the other issue is the timbers at the little cabin, the artist cabin or a terrace cabin, whatever, what I call the Tuncleave cabin, are covered in bark. I mean, they are literally logs that are probably no more than 20 to 30 years old, tops. So that puts the window for dendrochronology rings at a very early, if they are 1690, I mean, you're basically looking at, we have to find other samples from between 1630 and 1720. So that's going to be a hard one too, because Pensbury Manor just demolished. The only other house in the township that is of that same vintage, there are a couple. There's Tristram's old section of Tristram's house. There's the Huff House on Moyer Road, and I have a list of about 4 other structures that were built, and actually CT's own house, which is the original William Yardley house, may have timbers. I've never been in the basement of that house, so I don't know whether there are timbers available there that are very old as well. I know that that house did have a fire very early on. So it'd be interesting to see. I mean, we would have to really kind of scrounge very quickly to find homeowners that would be willing to have that done. And I don't know what he would charge us. Can we negotiate with him about having, I'd like to send Oxford a pretty good representation of other local trees. Recently, a tree was just taken down on Deborah's house from which was clearly is part of a will, was built in 1721. They just took down a gigantic living black oak tree that had a diameter of at least 8 feet at the base. So I would say that would be probably one of the older trees in the area. And I think he has samples of that available.
Yeah, that was something that I was going to bring up as well when I was researching this company. Most of the reports that I found have been in England, but as you said, there is a database that they already have, and I'm curious if they have anything, if you know, from Southeast Pennsylvania that they might be able to already compare to, or how much we'll have to provide to them.
I know that the Moon Williamson cabin in Falsington was done back in the 1990s and went to Oxford as well. But actually, you're there, right? You're still there?
Yep.
Maybe you could check.
Go over and check it out. I mean, that is a question, Donna. They say there's 300 local, regional, and national databases. And, there's several dendrochronology providers, and I don't know whether they all use the same databases or whether they have databases that are exclusive to them. So I think it would be helpful to have some more information as to what databases they would be using, which would have, samples specifically from our area.
Michael did tell me that he does have some samples from Bucks County over there and from New Jersey that are close enough that they could be used for comparison. But this laboratory is the one that's used by the Queen. So I would imagine they are the best.
I mean, yeah, sure. And they could have a great set of samples from New England. I mean, from England, but that's not going to help us because when you look at what ages, environmental factors play a big role into that. So you can't compare necessarily a tree from, or a sample from England to that from here and get the same kind of aging. You need to have a good database, a good local database.
They would not be comparing with the English samples.
Yeah. So, I mean, our question is where would they be getting and how many samples would they have and things like that?
Yeah. So do we send them 4 samples of what we think the date is of those samples and then have them check it? And then we could then take other samples from other houses and check whether they match up as well. I mean, we have microscopes. We can look at stuff under microscopes as well.
No, they'll come out and do the sampling, right? So that's why Donna was saying that Michael wanted that.
Yeah, Michael.
So we could see what's there. They'll take all the samples and do the prep for it. The question is what's the database they're comparing it against?
Yeah, that's a question for Michael. And I also wanted to mention that when they do come out and do the samples, they fill them and they're matched. So if there's any concern that there would be a hole left, that's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for looking into this.
Sure.
Yeah, we also have another person who does this and can take samples as well. So I don't know. But he would be more like doing it as a volunteer. So, basically, I would go with things that are documented and then see if we can check it against other stuff that we can take later. So what we're talking about what did we ask Mike to look into?
That's what the proposal is for 4.
Yeah, he just wrote it for 4, depending on whatever the budget is.
Yeah.
I mean, if we find that there's good public interest and we do a fundraiser and we can do more sampling, that's a plus. Anything that we can have to build the history, the understanding and interpretation of this property so that it's not converted to uses that are not appropriate for a site of this age.
Helen, in reading through the National Register submission, which we'll talk about next, I didn't see any challenges from the state back on the age of any of the buildings. We're asking for more information about the age. Is that your reading also, or did I miss something?
I'd really like to see if we can get this going, though. Dan, do you have
Are we talking about their National Register application, or are we talking about the dendrochronology in your question?
I was talking about the dendrochronology in terms of budget. Do we have, you've heard what Donna had to say. I mean, do we ask for 6 samples? Do we ask for 5 samples? What would be your input? And I'd like to make a motion that we get at least started to negotiate with Mr. Hubel on it.
So I think in terms of starting the starting the conversation with them directly, it would go through our township manager first, rather than Public Works or Community Development, which is Mr. Majewski. And then what he would do, he would bring it to the Board of Supervisors and ask us if, he would probably have some preliminary conversations with a few folks just to get a feel for things. When I say a few folks, I mean, as we're talking, I'm looking at different dendrochronology labs on the internet here just to see who's in PA. I'm seeing the Oxford Tree Ring Lab in front right now, but that's just an example. So he would have a couple preliminary conversations with them and get a feel for things, and then develop depending on the cost, there's certain requirements for townships to put certain certain items out to RFP based on the cost. So we may need to RFP this based on the price. Obviously, it's not in the agenda not the agenda. I'm sorry, the budget this year, because it wasn't something that was contemplated last year when we were doing the budget. But there may be some funding available to do something like this if it's not too expensive. So all that being said, in terms of what this board could recommend, if we'd probably like to get some guidance as a board member. I'll speak freely here. As a board member, I'd like to get some guidance from this group, and maybe it comes out of our township manager speaking with a couple of these companies to see how many samples we should get, what the price per sample is, and all that other stuff, so that we get a better feel for whether or not we need to RFP it or not, or if we could sole source it based on Pennsylvania regulations for what townships can just go spend money on versus RFPing, if that's clear.
And we could get a donation from Patterson Farm Group, I would think, because you've already discussed that. So hopefully maybe matching funds from the township would be enough to do a quick, like you said, not too expensive search. Okay. I think that makes sense.
And then, but at the same time, just to cover ourselves, right? We run that by the township manager, because there are rules around donations and matching funds and all that other stuff too, that we got to make sure everything's above. I think it's a great idea. We just want to check the boxes to make sure everything's above board and we're following the rules. That's all.
Alan, I think we need to be clear on what we want to accomplish with the project, right? I mean, certainly, dating of Satterthwaite and the cottage, I mean, that's fine. If that's our goal and our only goal, or if that's all the information we need, then I think we have a solid proposal. But, if we need to look at other structures on Patterson Farm, we may need to add that in. So I just think we need to be just clear around what we want to accomplish.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll make a motion to that effect, that we explore dendrochronology proposal with the township manager and report back at the next meeting to get it through the municipal system to start the process.
Any questions, comments, seconds?
Second.
All in favor?
Joe, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Dan.
The only from making a recommendation to the board via a motion here, the township manager is not going to know a heck of a lot about this. The board's not going to know a heck of a lot about this. So I think I would request, or appreciate anyway, before we bring it to the board, that we have a pretty clear laid out plan and some guidance as to how it needs to be done, what the goal is of the, where we're going to do it, how it needs to be done, and what the goal of what information we're going to get out of it and why. And if we can, maybe we can, I'll make this recommendation, maybe between this meeting and next meeting, you can work that out. And then next meeting, you have a clear and concise plan laid out such that you can present that to this group, vote on it, and then bring that to the township manager and the board, or the board of supervisors, so that then the township manager has a very good understanding of what's being requested, so he can dig into it that way.
Right.
Okay, so I move to table this until next meeting. And in the interim, maybe James and I and Donna can get together and put it together. It is necessary, I would say, because of the National Register application. We want to be clearer with our dating of the structures that are there, and this would nail that down, and also connect to the development of the village and the other things that need to be done to complete the National Register process on the various crops, et cetera, used by that farm over the years. So it does contribute heavily to early dating of the structures on the Patterson Farm.
Understood.
And the
Okay.
case for significance, right? At the end of the day, that's what the dates do, is they
Exactly.
hammer home the case for
Yeah,
significance.
it makes a difference if this is Thomas Johnny's original cabin that he sells to Thomas Tuncliffe, or John Tuncliffe. That's a big deal, because there is no other site that's intrinsically connected to him. So if it comes in as earlier than 1690, then it's actually Johnny's property. So that would be really interesting. And the other pieces, I kind of expect will be in the 1730s, but we'll see.
Okay, sound good? So Chris, we'll capture that as an action item for next meeting. Okay, very good. Donna, anything else?
Well, on a separate subject, I did have a resident inquire whether it would be possible to do a cleanup around the Octagonal Schoolhouse site. So maybe that's something for this board to consider at some time in the future.
Yeah. Well, I will say that's not a bad idea. The only issue with the Octagonal Schoolhouse is that it's on privately owned land. So we don't have right. I'm using air quotes. I know you can't see me, but we don't have rights to do that per se. Maybe along the roadway because that is public right of way, but we just have to be careful about where we're doing the work.
It's now that you mentioned public right of way, there has been some dumping of construction items like window frames, and there's a TV that's been dumped there. Can the Township Public Works swing by and pick that up?
Would you do me a favor and send either the township or the township manager and the public works director, Greg Huckelbridge, an email about that?
Sure.
I would, just so everyone knows, some of the township, to my knowledge, I'm not touching my township email at the moment because there was some sort of issue with the township server today.
Whoa.
And I haven't touched it today, so it's easier if someone from outside sends the email, to be honest with you. Otherwise, I would do it right now.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
Dan, the other issue about that is at one point we actually thought about cleaning it up, and the Wieners had given us permission to take down the vines and some of the stuff, and then it ended up being a disaster because people stole the stones. So that's part of the issue, that we really don't want to disturb it until we can actually secure it and get a camera on it and stuff like that. So.
Well, Joe, could you indulge me for 1 second since they brought up the Octagonal Schoolhouse? I don't know if anyone saw the meeting. I think it was our last meeting. Maybe it was the meeting before the board of supervisors meeting. We were the Regency folks. We're looking at new pedestrian connections between Regency North and Regency South. And one of those areas where the new pedestrian access would be is the existing Old Oxford Valley Road, which is immediately adjacent to the Octagonal Schoolhouse. We're looking at doing something there to make it's already sort of a beat up road there, but turning that into a walkway, there's the utility lines there, but that would be immediately adjacent to the Octagonal Schoolhouse. And during that discussion, I mentioned potentially doing something with that. Obviously it's privately owned, but that is going on. We're looking at doing other crossings there, connect the in different areas along that same stretch between the two developments, but that may be an opportunity for us, since we will have a focus on it fairly soon to address that. So anyway, I threw that up. Thank you, Joe. I didn't want to derail things, but it reminded me.
Dan, in terms of acquisition, are the township supervisors amenable to? I checked its value, and it's actually $400. So it's listed in the tax list as a $400. They have been paying. It's about $18 a year in taxes that the Wiener family has been paying for the last almost 70 years now. So perhaps we can come to some arrangement. Barbara had a real knack of talking to Otto, but unfortunately Otto passed in February. So now she's talking to one of the daughters who's a lawyer. And it seems to me this would be the perfect time to see if the township could acquire it.
Yeah, it's acquisitions lately have been hard to come by, from what I can tell. I can only speak for myself. One of five. I'm personally interested in it. I'd welcome the conversation, and who knows, maybe if they could, if they would like to gift it to us, I'm sure that would also be something that the board would be interested in. But any information you have about the owner and contact information, I'd be happy to look at it and bring it up with the board and see where we can go from there.
So you want us to pass along the contact information to you?
If you have it, that would be great.
Barbara does, so we can get it from Barbara.
Okay.
Okay. All right, very good. Donna, thank you very much. Thank you for coming out today, and we look forward to working with you on this.
You're welcome. Thanks very much for your time. Have a good evening.
Okay.
Thanks, Donna.
Thank you, Donna. I'm going to head off too.
Okay, James, thanks.
See you all.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, James.
John, is there any public comment on those first two topics?
I don't believe so. Give me just a moment to double check though. Ernest is here with a public comment.
Hi, this is Joe. Could you please state your name and address?
Yes, my name is Ernest Semino. I'm the property owner at 1666 Edgewood Road, which is adjacent to Mr. Troilo's project, The Point.
Hello, Dr. Semino.
Hi. Can the committee hear me at this time?
Yes, we can hear you.
I was I was listening in on the HARB meeting last night, and I think Mr. Grenier and Mr. Troilo did a good job of reviewing some of the pertinent points, but it does not seem like either of them embraced my concern as an interested party, that I thought the density of the project was still too great. And I would like Dr. Hines to correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding of the historic commercial zone is that without a variance, it's supposed to be 12 units per acre, which for this 3/4 acre piece of property would be 9 units without a variance. And when he first presented his development plan, it was 18 units, which is twice as many as is allowed without a variance. And now his new project is 55% over the recommended 9 units for the 3/4 acre. And I heard Dr. Hines, I was concerned that neither Mr. Grenier or Mr. Troilo embraced my concern that at least I think the density is still too great at 14 units for this 3/4 acre. And I heard Dr. Hines say tonight something to the effect of, well, Mr. Troilo, we're allowing you, 14 units for this project, even though the appropriate amount would be 12. In my mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, without a variance, the number of units would be 9 units for this 3/4 acre, and 12 units would be 33% above what's recommended and would require a variance. And furthermore, in my mind, 14 units is too many. So I'd like Dr. Hines to comment on the appropriate number of units for this 3/4 acre project.
Well, Joe, before that happens, let me clarify a couple of things for Dr. Semino. One, the zoning hearing board is the entity that has the final say on variances with respect to densities. And I'll respectfully, I take issue with the fact that you didn't think I embraced your concerns, because when you look at the Board of Supervisors meeting when the variances were requested, I was the one that adamantly pushed for us to oppose the variance requests specific to density. So maybe I wasn't as loud about it last night, and I can appreciate why you might feel that way. But density is a very big issue here, which thankfully we ended up with a very rare 3-2 vote on the Board of Supervisors to oppose that variance request in a way that we don't usually get. So I just want to make sure that's clear. In terms of process, right, there's the HARB versus the Historic Commission versus the Zoning Hearing Board and even the Planning Commission. 3 of those 4 I'm the liaison to. So CT is going to hear my complaints or comments or whatever they may be, 3 of those 4 meetings plus the Board of Supervisors meeting. But all that being said, I think Dr. Hines from the HARB last night was attempting to, I let him take the lead in terms of addressing the density issue, including that the very large 6-unit building that I don't think this HARB or this group, or myself for that matter, really liked. And he was he took the lead in providing some guidance and requests in terms of breaking up the larger building and making it smaller. And then you heard Dr. Hines tonight talking about what the limits are for the addition. I believe it was 10% from the T&D, which would further bring down the units for the one house. And then if we break out the 6-unit house and make that smaller, that would further reduce the units, and then potentially something else would also reduce it. So last night when and I'll finish with this, last night when Mr. Hines at the HARB was talking about the massing of the buildings, was the term he was using very often, that's when we were referencing concerns about the density. I understand he's asking for more, the developer is, CT is asking for more than is allowed under the current zoning. And he's asking for a variance for that, but he will continue to get pushback, I believe, from the HARB, this group, the Board of Supervisors, and I can't speak for the Zoning Hearing Board because I haven't been the liaison there, but I wouldn't be surprised if he gets that there too. So I'm not trying to be argumentative, Dr. Semino. I just want to make sure it's clear to you that that issue is not going away anytime soon.
I appreciate that. I stand corrected. I was just concerned when I heard Dr. Helen Hines tonight say that we had 12, we're allowing you 14 or something to that effect. That concerned me.
So Dr. Hines, what is the appropriate number?
Well, I have to say that, this has been, Dr. Simon, you have to understand that this has been basically almost a 30-year project as well, with us and my husband having been on HARB almost as long as I've been on the Historic Commission. And the issue is that it's demolition by neglect for the structures that he has there. And as a homeowner, as a property owner in Pennsylvania, he has every legal right to take down any historic structure with absolutely very little negative impact from our zoning in Lower Makefield Township. So at all peril, we have to try to save as much of the historic structure, particularly the buildings that are on the National Register, both of which these are specifically listed separately on that register, and not have them suddenly destroyed by, say, an act of God or something else, or a truck plowing into one of them, while we also want to see the neighborhood developed. I mean, we're trying to kind of maintain a balance that will keep him interested enough to try to restore these structures and give us a residential and commercial space that is not going to be horrific for the rest of the township. And it's a really delicate balance. And over the years, I think I've been yelled at umpteen times over trying to save these structures. And at this point, I don't have much patience anymore with him saying, "Oh, well, they're structurally unsound." Well, after 30 years of neglect, of course they're structurally unsound. It's going to be difficult, but it's going to cost you money, and you're going to do it. So that's where I'm coming from, and I agree with Mr. Grenier that I'm relying on the integrity of the zoning board to hold to the zoning that he's entitled to, and I'm hoping that they will act accordingly.
Yeah. But Dr. Semino, to answer your question, I believe what when he showed the site plan, it actually has the zoning requirements on there. I don't have it in front of me, but this is from memory. I believe it's 12 dwelling units per acre. I believe you're correct in what you were mentioning earlier.
I appreciate your comments and Dr. Helen Hines' comments. And I realized that, 12 units is a compromise above 9 and 14 is a compromise above 9. And it's a fine line, the compromise, to get the property developed and not demolished. I just wanted to have a voice out there that I would prefer 12 units instead of 14.
Yes, we agree with you, and we're working as hard as we can to see that accomplished in a reasonable manner. And you can't prevent a developer from doing his best to make it the most profitable enterprise for his investees as well. But yeah, this is just the delicate dance we do all the time, and it's very frustrating and it's very difficult when you think you have an arrangement and then they kind of turn around and stab you in the back. So that it has happened before, and we'll see what happens here.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. That concludes my public comment.
Thank you, Dr. Smita.
If he hasn't hung up, the last thing I'll say, and I know he will do this, but his comments have been very well spoken and received, I think, from every board that's reviewed these to date. But please continue to attend, especially, nothing against the Historic Commission, but in terms of who has a final say in certain things that how they go forward. Make sure to please continue to attend the HARB meetings and provide feedback. The zoning hearing board meetings to provide feedback. You definitely could have standing there your next door. And then also the Board of Supervisors meetings when it's finally presented to us, whether it's because of a variance request or eventually a site plan approval through the Planning Commission. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for that, as I'm sure you will. And every single time we have a meeting, please continue to reiterate your comments, because they don't end up on deaf ears.
Thank you. I will.
John, was there any other public comment?
No further public comment.
All right, thank you. So let's go back and look at the agenda again real quick. And the first item on the agenda was the approval of the March 2022 minutes, which I had distributed. So are there any questions or comments on the minutes? If not, can I hear a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
Tom motions.
Second.
Ellen and Victor second. Any all approvals? Everybody say aye. No.
Aye.
Good. No. Nobody. All right. Very good. What I tried to do on this is also capture what the action items are, right? So we don't lose them. Otherwise, we just don't make progress on things. So I put on here, and I just wanted to go through real quick, what were the action items and what was the status. So one is that we talked about reviewing the ad hoc property committee presentation and report and highlight areas of further consideration by the commission. And that's on the agenda down below for us to discuss. We said we would distribute the previous national registration submissions for the farmsteads. That was completed. I sent that out. We also said that we would review the National Register submission and highlight areas of additional information that were requested or needed. And hopefully we can discuss that below. Dan had asked us last time around funding priorities for historic preservation for 2022 and 2023. We'll get to that. I know, Tom, that you had tried to set up a meeting with the program coordinator at Howe Farm, and I couldn't make it on the suggested day. So I think what we probably need to do is keep that open, and maybe I think what might be better is if we visited actually the farm and begin to see what some of the programs they have there.
Yeah, the program coordinator doesn't actually live in the area. He lives in North Jersey somewhere. And he comes down once a month for a board meeting with the Howe Farm members. And he wanted to meet with us at one of their meetings so we could sort of sit in and see what kinds of things they discussed in terms of programs, and then spend some time with us afterwards to discuss some ideas. So that was the idea. I can see if he's amenable to just meeting with us individually or meeting with us at the Howell Farm and see what he says.
Okay, or just find out when the dates for his next meeting. I couldn't make that last one, but perhaps the next one then.
Yeah,
Okay.
you mentioned that Wednesday night was bad. Is that in general or just that particular Wednesday
It was
night?
just that Wednesday night. Yeah, it was just that
Okay, okay. I'll keep working on it.
The only other Wednesday nights I have commitment are the second Wednesdays of every month. So, but so do you. Okay, and then the last one was to send the recommended goals and objectives to the township manager for approval by the board of supervisors. Now, Dan, I sent those over to Kurt, but I have to admit that I haven't kept track of whether they were either reviewed or approved by the board. Do you have a status for us?
They were provided to the board. I think I actually forwarded them to the board as well. I haven't seen them put on the agenda yet. What I can do this next board meeting is I can mention them again and ask if we need to put them on the agenda for the board to accept or discuss them. Unfortunately, since I'm the secretary this year, not the chair, I have no real say in the matter in terms of whether or not they get on the agenda.
Okay.
So it may be something that if they don't get on the agenda, then I just, as part of my supervisory report for the Historical Commission, I just read it and get it on the record and see if we can do something about it.
Okay.
To have a vote, it may not be, if we don't need to vote on it for any reason, then if I read it into the record, it's there and maybe I can get some response. If we need to have a vote on accepting it, then it has to be on an agenda, I believe, per Sunshine Act rules. And I can't force that. That's not, I don't have that ability in my current role. So that's what we need to be clear about, just in case you're not aware of the process for how the agendas get set up. That's all.
All right, thank you. Yeah. Well, just let us know if there's any comments or feedback and things that we need to be aware of.
Absolutely.
Okay. And while we have you on, one of the agendas list is a discussion of the ad hoc property committee report. So could you maybe just update us to where the board is with regards to the recommendation by the ad hoc property committee and what is happening now with those recommendations?
Sure, and I'm not sure there's much to update you on. I think everyone, if you haven't, I highly recommend everyone reviewing not only the report, but the presentation that was provided. The chair of that committee gave his presentation a few meetings back, Dennis Stedman. I think it was very well received. That's on the township website. That's why I'm recommending that people take a look at it. I believe it's on the homepage. At this point, we haven't taken it, except, this meeting talking about the endocrinology stuff. We haven't, as a board, taken any formal steps forward with the recommendations just yet, because a lot of it will have to do with funding and the budget process, which doesn't start. It really gets going full bore September, October timeframe for the 2023 budget. And that's how a lot of these items, early stage items, would get implemented, is being funded, because none of that is in the budget for 2022. That being said, items like setting up the dendrochronology testing, items like developing an early phase, they talked about their phased plan. I would actually say there's probably a phase 0 that wasn't included in their report that would include a lot of the items, or updating a lot of the items that Mr. Majewski has put in the, I think he's provided to this group as well in terms of the previous reports that have been done, the various items that have been completed. So I think personal opinion, as someone who's been in land development, environmental issues, and all that stuff for years, I think we need to, and when talking with Dennis Stedman about it as well, I think the phase 0 plan, which was alluded to but not discussed and presented so much at that meeting, was doing assessments of the buildings and properties first from a physical, structural, environmental perspective, because there are all of those issues with those sites first, so that we can then better, and we've done that over the last few years with a couple of the buildings, but get all of that done or updated so that then we have baseline information for the structures and the grounds. In addition to that, there is some planning that can be done just in terms of what the long-term goals, that you don't have to spend money on that, long-term goals and plans are for properties or individual buildings at the site, so that once we get all of that baseline data, we can use that to work towards an actual goal, right? So like, how are we going to use the shattered story house in the years to come? How are we going to use the barns? All that stuff, we don't have a plan yet. So there's going to be, so we can go in parallel paths. We can start the planning process and have discussions about that and recommendations and working groups and however the board wants to do it, to talk about what the long-term plans could or should be. But at the same time, we also have to do that baseline, those baseline studies, so we know what we could do moving forward. So I think those could be a parallel path. And then after that, that's when I'll say that that's when the fun starts, really, because then you start trying to figure out how to actually implement those plans, and how do we do these restorations or renovations or cleanups or whatever we have to do to actually implement those plans long term. So I think all that's really, but in order to do that, we need money to do that. That needs to be in the budget. We need to have a long term, not only a year-to-year budget, but I think we need a, similar to what we had set up for the sewer system before it was sold. We had a 7-year budget plan, how we might implement things. We don't have that yet. I think we need to develop that. And that's kind of what the ad hoc property committee was talking about too. So I'm not sure I gave you an answer, but I think we have to get to a spot where we can actually move forward towards an answer. And we're not quite there yet. And just if you weren't aware, our township, because it relates to this in terms of the budget, our township manager submitted his resignation this past meeting. He'll be moving on to another township come early July. So we're also going to be in the process of finding a new township manager over that same time period. And that individual will have to get fully immersed in this too, to help us through the process. So that's really more about different items that we have to consider moving forward. It shouldn't slow us up, but it is something that obviously from a practical perspective comes into play.
Okay, good. Thanks, Dan. It's getting close to 9. We're already on 90 minutes. We had a couple of topics, none of which will get done in 5 minutes. So what I'd like to do is make a proposal. I like to, as Helen suggested, we do with the dendrochronology project. I'd like to suggest that maybe a small group of us look at the National Register submission, and another small group of us look at the ad hoc property committee, and then draft for the commission a position on it. So for the National Register, we would simply go through it and decide what information is being requested to make it a more complete submission. And for the ad hoc property committee, we would look at just what is our position or our response to what the ad hoc property committee put together. And it's nothing against the committee itself, but there's a number of backup materials that come from external people in there, which let's say some of those are concerning from an historic preservation perspective. So I would say, does anyone have a interest in leading either one of those?
Well, I'll head up the National Register part if you want to do that. We really need to get those agricultural schedules downloaded and get that part written. The second issue was the connection to Edgewood Village. That part can be written very easily as well. The most difficult part is the dating, so that dendrochronology thing comes into play, and that needs to go full tilt as fast as we possibly can. If we can stick that into their preliminary planning schedule, the 0 timeline, that would be better than not. So I'm going to push for that.
Yeah, I mean, there was a couple of other requests that were made too with regards to on the historic significance in terms of comparison to other places in the area. Has anyone read that? Does anyone want to work with Helen on the national, not to write it, but just to understand what data is needed to make it more complete, what data was requested?
I can help you, Alan. Helen, if you can use my help.
Okay. And anyone want to work with me on putting together the thoughts from the preservation, from the historical commission on the ad hoc property committee presentation and report?
Yeah, I can help with that.
Okay. All right, good. So I think we'll each take those topics, we'll put something together, and then at the next meeting, we'll kind of report out on it for the commission as a whole to review and comment on.
In the meantime, Joe, or Dan, is it just going to be seasonal continuation? I hope somebody's planting seeds this spring and our farmer is doing what best he can do to get into a crop so that at least Lower Makefield doesn't starve to death.
Well, farming, maybe I misunderstood, but farming is not stopped by any means at the site. Is that your question?
I'm just worried that I know he was worried and concerned that he didn't have a contract. So
he has a 5-year contract in place.
Oh, okay, yeah. He wants it extended, yeah.
No, I know, and I've argued in favor of extending it, but that hasn't occurred. But he has a 5-year contract in place. He should be farming as per the usual, probably right now, looking at the dates, getting everything going. So nothing is stopping him from doing that. The only thing about the ad hoc property committee that we brought up is that, it's obviously a farm, and anything we do should not hinder the farmer's ability to continue farming, and we should look to see how we can further improve that. But all that being said, no, he should absolutely be farming. He has a contract, and he's got full rights to whatever, as per previous years to keep going.
But he doesn't have access to the pack house or to the barns at this point.
I don't know I'll be honest with you. I don't know the details of which buildings he can access versus which ones he can't.
Pretty good. John, any other public comment?
No further public comment.
Can I hear a motion?
I just had one quick question. I got a little confused when Donna was presenting. Do we or do we not have a proposal for the dendrochronology?
We do. I distributed the proposal that Donna has in hand.
Okay, and it has the cost estimates in that proposal.
Pretty much. What they basically say is they talk about these phases, and each phase has 10 samples, and they give an estimate of $1,500 to $2,000 per phase. Yeah.
We have more questions for him than actually than he had for us. So I'm the person who's really concerned about the database is what's going on, because I think that's critical.
Right. And again, it's really important that we're clear on what we want, because if we're just looking at the relative age of parts of Satterthwaite, for example, then he can compare the samples to one another and begin to age them. But I think Helen's asking for something much more specific. She's saying she wants to get into like a 10, 20-year window as to when the oldest part of the house was built. And that means he needs to have some type of database of samples to compare against. So.
No, understood.
Right. If there's no other comments or questions, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded by Helen. All right. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate your time tonight, and we'll be in touch. Okay.
Thanks, everyone.